Welcome back, everyone. Today, both Eldad and I are in Tel Aviv. So we have the pleasure of having Weichen Wang here, who's a senior engineering manager at Amplitude. So kind of a few words about Amplitude and Weichen. So Amplitude is actually at this point a public company. Before that, they raised more than 300 million kind of in private rounds. And Weichen is based in Vancouver, British Columbia. He leads the data connections team there and kind of build and scale their Vancouver site. So we're super happy to have you. And do you maybe want to give us a high level view of what Amplitude does and what service you guys deliver to your customers?
Oh, sure. First of all, I just want to thank you for having me today. Super thrilled. My name is Weichen. Thanks for the introduction. Maybe I can talk about the Amplitude and also the team when I'm working on. So for Amplitude, we are a digital analytical platform, right? So we start as serving the customers for product analytics, right? So we're giving the self-service visibility into the entire customer journey. We have all those tools for funnel analysis, the behavior graphs, event segmentation, all of that. And I guess the key takeaway here is we try to help the entire a spectrum of data collection, instrumentation, governance, and all to getting insight and sharing it out. So it's actually kind of the one in all solution, if you may. And so for the team I'm working on, so we're the data connection team, and as the name suggests, our mission is to send the data in and out to the right place at the right time, right? So that's if you think about the entire space out there, there are all different sorts of services, including data warehouse, are the ads, marketing, and like CRM, CDP, right? So sometimes the data has to be sent in real time, where the time is of the essence. The other time, the data will be sent in batch, in the different natures, and basically that's where our team is building this pipeline and also the tools, the user interface for our customers to handle those data.
All right, sounds awesome. We'll have a lot to talk about. Cool. So how big is your team basically? And data connectors, right? Can you give some examples of where data exactly, where's the data coming from? Where is it going?
Yeah. So if you talk about the Amplitude as a whole, we're about 700 people altogether. And for engineering, I would say it's less than 200 at the moment, right? So we're still a fairly small team at the moment, right? So in data collection is roughly less than 30 people, I say, altogether. So it is, again, it's a fairly small team, right? So so you want an example of the connections, right? So I already named just a few of the categories, right? So the different places people want to bring data in, and these years, the data warehouse has been a really prevalent choices where they serve the first step in all the data, when they do the governance and everything, and this serves as the source of truth. Where in the other cases, some clients might prefer trying to get data in directly from instrumentation, right? Using our SDKs and sending that directly from their devices or websites. So where the data hits to us directly in the streaming fashion. So that's already a different type of ingestions, right? So when it comes to exports, right? So there are different, again, for example, sometimes people use us at the CDP capacity where they do real-time event propagation. So we send as soon as we receive the data, we probably send them to their data warehouse or anything else. In the other cases, maybe they generate insights. For example, they might do queries on user segmentations with audiences, and this is a new group of users. They want to start a new campaign on ads. Then they actually want to sync that audience to Google Ads, for example, right? So and that's another problem. So we're trying to support as much as we can at the moment. It's about around 100 source and destinations. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Can you give us a feeling maybe of the data sizes or the data volume you guys are dealing with?
Yeah. So basically, we measure the data, the ingest data, in sort of a number of events, right? Events are the kind of basic. So monthly, we process somewhere around 5 trillion events altogether, and most of them at the moment is real time, like streaming. But we also is ingesting lots of batch data as well. Yeah.
5 trillion is nice. Very
nice. Yeah, definitely.
Is it on a daily basis, a monthly?
No, that's monthly basis. Yeah.
Awesome. You kind of manage the connector team, right? And this is where you have most experience, but do you want to give us a kind of high level overview of the internal data stack at Amplitude and where the data goes kind of after it made it through your connector?
Sure. Yeah. So I can give you a high-level architecture overview. Although I'm trying to not disclose too much information that I could not be talking about, right? So when the most important part when Amplitude started, there's a few principles that when we came, and again, this is actually came from one of the early engineers and the founders, where I joined in a much later time, right? So the one of the key point here is we want to make the data query super fast. Right, and even with the real-time data coming in, how can you update existing query in real time? Well, basically, with as lower latency as possible. So basically, they chose the columnar storage architecture. Because if you think about the queries you're going to make, especially for product index, right? So making like say DAUs or other things, users who did this action after that action is usually with just one or two properties that you're interested in among all the event property or user properties for the data. So when you index things in column, things get super fast, right? So then we actually have an in-house column storage system, right? So it's proprietary, and we basically at the end of the day, it just stored the raw events and we can index in a way so that when we have a query system we call Nova that actually builds on top of it. So it's actually working in a kind of a divide and conquer fashion, where it's try to utilize a cluster of computing resources based on those indexes, so that you can get the query results out super fast. So that's kind of the essence of the system. For the streaming, of course, there are lots of like say Kafka, the very vertical stuff, right? So we also use Postgre. Lots of things started with MySQL, but they're trying to move away from that, right? So and then everything was on AWS. Right, so we have a user S3 for storing those raw indexes and events. So that's probably the most important thing on a high level. But of course, there's a bunch of things that down the roof, like we use Redis, we use a bunch of other stuff.
Gotcha. Okay, but so
who should take credit for inventing columnar storage in databases?
Okay, asking the database research questions to me.
Is it the Stanford guys or is it the CWI?
That's a good question.
Is it C-Store or is it MongoDB?
So as someone from Central Europe, let's give it to Amsterdam.
Boom, Amsterdam wins.
Amsterdam wins, easy. But I mean, that's super cool. So basically, at least at the core of your stack, you then have this in-house query engine in a sense. Okay, it's not talking SQL, but this kind of domain-specific language then, which actually powers all of the stack. That's actually super interesting. Cool. What's actually the kind of, would you say, hardest thing about your internal data stack? Is it low latency? Is it high concurrency? Kind of, what are actually the biggest data challenges in a sense you guys are dealing with and trying to give your users a great experience?
If I have to put it in word, it's just the scale. Right, so everything it was easy when the scale is small, but as the lots and lots of demand coming in, even the original architecture would not scale in many aspects. Even so, just actually feasibility when the query span, you cannot scale it vertically, just a number of clusters and all that. And the other part is cost, right? So for real time, it all sounds really good, but there of course every comes with a trade-off, right? So it's a intentional design that we have, but then that also actually has a recurring burden on us to making everything super fast, right? Because sometimes there are use cases. Let's make example. I don't know if you actually order food with DoorDash, right? So maybe you put something in your shopping bucket, but you didn't check out and you move away. Maybe in the DoorDash, hey, you want to send the coupon or push notification right way in 30 seconds before you gave up and try to finish that order. That is super time sensitive. So that's why we need that, to be really fast responding. In other cases, if the data itself maybe sitting there in the monthly data of your inventory and stuff, there's no sensitivity of time urgency, and that cost is kind of extra, right? So yes, there's lots. The other example is data mutability. Right. So if you think about the event you ingested from instrumentation like SDKs, most of you think, the data is immutable, and which is the assumption that the system was built before. But there are lots of cases where that's not assumption is not true. The biggest example is just GDPR, right? The data deletion request, where they actually remove every trace of certain users, and that is a big pain point. When we actually have a dedicated team to handling that, right? So and that's actually cost a lot.
GDPR.
Yeah. So, then we're of course rethinking our architecture.
Also European.
Exactly. Like as European,
Another
you take credit the
European
second
origin,
time.
extra the delete feature in the database and data warehouse.
Yeah, if you ever dealt with it, it's very, it's a definite challenge if it was not designed to begin with. Yeah.
And I remember that period where delete was dead and everyone was happy with append only immutable. And there was this 2 years where everyone was happy and life was presumably becoming simple. And then GDPR came and everyone woke up. Tell me, ecosystem-wise, input, output, you said Kafka and Postgres. We get that a lot. Like, what do you see? Do you see more Kafka, more Postgres, one overtaking the other? We see a lot of Postgres comeback of Postgres. What's your take on that?
So I guess, Kafka is mostly for streaming process, right? It's, Postgre is, we use it primarily for storing metadata, right? So we actually don't use it, because we have already our separate, column indexing system. So Postgre is not used for that purposes, right? So, and this is kind of because, I actually was listening to some of your shows, right? And lots of people are coming from data engineering background, that they're familiar with just the SQL or just relational database kind of thing. For us, it's quite. We started with the streaming perspective, where the data is coming in and we see everything in the stream. Whereas the batch process, or it's actually coming at a different stage, where we have a separate architecture of it, where the system was not designed to begin with to handle that. But nevertheless, I think there's the benefits will come with designing at a later stage. That means we already learned the use cases, right? So that we know how to optimize that. So back to your question, so Postgre is a popular database. Yes, we use it all the time. There's a reason that we move it away from MySQL, I suppose, right? So at the same time, they're just serving different purposes.
What about output? How do you export your data? Do you see a lot of customers using your platform as a way to cleanse and prepare and then share data with others? How does it play with the existing data, with the Snowflakes of the world?
So that's an interesting one. There are a few part of it. First, let's about just the data governance, right? So there's again multiple parts of it, but I think one phrase I really like is garbage in, garbage out, right? So you have to really control your data, and just if you think about all the instrumentation or tools out there, there are certain solutions that actually offer basically with no instrumentation. That's basically auto tracking that tracks every button clicks, every event you get from the app. Of course, that's easy for to set up, but then there's a time where you have to dig really deep. It's like imagine you're in this pile of garbage and try to figure out the gold in it, right? So it's time consuming. It may work. And whereas the other part, which basically with Amplitude, at least at the current stance, is we try to do tracking plans, and we try to do versioning of that. So there's a lots of tools we build so that you have a really protected data schema that actually the infrastructure shared across the entire organization. So all the teams will actually benefit from it. I know it might sound, lots of overhead for to start with, and we're trying to make it easier for small but low maturity customers. But if you are actually the bigger customers out there, it's actually beneficial to start with, especially to basically make a peace of mind for the data leaders. Right, so that's one part, and the other part. So we have the part of dedupe identity resolution that's happening, or how we enhance the existing raw events with all the user properties or the group properties, and then there's a part we actually try to send it out. In order to touch a little bit, there's a real time propagation we call streaming, right? So whereas the other batch export, well, the other time we send out insights you generated, right? So how does that reconcile to the source of truth? I think this is a great question. I guess nowadays, because Snowflake or the other data warehouse is becoming prevalent, our mission is so that people don't think about that sort of truth problem. As a matter of fact,
people should always think. I'm telling you, I've learned that. I've been trying to build tools so people don't need to think it, and that those projects always ended up badly. But you talk first, your passion is amazing about your product.
Thank you.
We love that, and we love that, and just kind of listening to you over a few minutes, you learn how complex it gets when you move from theory to real life and try to practice data to drive your business. And this is why kind of all of these little things are so important. Tell me, how do you deal with data politics internally? your team, would that be considered an engineering, a data engineering, a data team? How do they work with the rest of the engineering organizations? What can you tell us about remote and the kind of the evolution of the team over the last few years? And some lessons learned, maybe. And
tell us everything.
All right. So you've asking multiple questions. So I'm hearing two, right? One is just the internal data policy, right? It's one. Two is kind of working the remote. So I start with the first one. So Amplitude has coming with a unique edge because we are a data analytical company. So drinking our own champagne is actually a motto for us, right? So we hold ourselves accountable whenever we release something. We actually be, even with a new feature coming on the Amplitude, we actually be the first one actually trying it out, right? If you're shipping a custom-facing feature, you better is using, A/B testing, experimentation. You better use feature flags and all the other instrumentation in place, so people know, from let's say you launch a new export like destinations of data, right? So how many people actually click on it, and what's the funnel from the user clicking on actually finishing, setting up the configuration with all the credentials and actually getting data through. So we have all this tracking and we hold ourselves accountable. It's never, we're shipping features out there. So in the sense, everyone is a data engineer or a growth engineer, so to speak, right? So, and I think that's definitely provides us with a unique edge, right? So that's one. So two, just on the remote, I am a remote in the sense because Amplitude headquarters in SF, right? So, and when I was, I think I was super, it's a blessing to me because, I was really looking for, I didn't even know what Amplitude is before someone reached out to me and they're opening the office here, right? So I was hired as one of the earliest managers here without an engineer, right? So, and a lot of work I was doing last year is just, building the team here, right? So,
and drinking champagne and drinking a lot of champagne.
Hopefully, yes.
Much nicer than dog fooding. Drinking, I would much rather
drink water here, but some companies are more involved.
It's just a different way of putting it, but you got it what it is. Yeah. So working remote, it comes. So it's I guess for us, it's lots of internal debate as well. Where Amplitude want to position ourselves, because as when the COVID started, and the situation is is staying there, right? So there's a new reality and a new paradigm that's a paradigm shift that would never go back, right? There's certain people would just prefer going remote 100%, and they're not even considering bringing a hybrid, right? So, and we actually had an internal votes and we had an internal discussions. So we at this moment, Amplitude is operating in the hybrid mode, where we require engineers to be in office 2 days a week, right? So we still cherish that in-person time, especially with collaboration. That's a lot of the quality time when the brainstorming or the face-to-face. So that cannot be replaced, in my opinion, right? But yes, there's a time people can definitely get focused on their work. They don't want to get disrupted with meetings and stuff. So that's where we are at right now. Of course, there's also another debate whether, for example, the teams should be clustered geographically. For example, maybe all the teams in Vancouver focus on data connections, and maybe teams in London work on something else. So I don't think that the debate is decisive, right? So there are things. My personal opinion is I do not think geographic location should be a parameter in that equation at all. But there's people who think otherwise, because I do believe that having that flexibility to tap into the talent pool globally definitely provides us a unique edge. And with the challenge coming with managing a distributed team, it's something that can be managed, in my opinion.
You see, Benjamin, it can be done.
It can be done. In terms of your team, where are people actually located?
So for especially at the moment, I run two. Actually, maybe I have to also dive into the kind of Amplitude structure. So we run a kind of EPD trail, right? So engineering, product, design, right? So and we have like pillars and pods. So in data connection, we have three pods, and I run two of them. So the streaming and the integrations. For integrations, the majority of the engineers is in Vancouver. For streaming, it's probably half.
So tell us about the most embarrassing failure you've had. And something that kind of was a big lesson for you. And answering, I'm perfect, I've never made mistake in my life is also valid. But
I don't know that in interviews, Eldar.
So that's what Benjamin answered on his interview. But we proved him wrong many times. That's why we That's why we went for this adventure. But like, data teams, we talk to many teams, engineering teams, and when it comes to data, people make a lot of mistakes. So I was just wondering, any project that went the wrong direction, any technology that had, huge promise and turned out to be huge flop, something smart for our listeners to learn from in terms of past experiences, the good or the bad. Usually we love the bad ones.
Okay, so this is however I like to share something, lots of things. I think Okay, so here's the example I think I can share. Okay, have you worked with OAuth, right? So basically, if you want to have a third-party authentication systems, right, so that if you work with the SaaS companies and it's big enough, right, so they will have authentication that without actually like say private keys and like the right keys. So basically, you authorize it on their behalf, right? So again, before going there, so Amplitude is in a really interesting position that lots of our customers are mutual, that we are their customer, that they are our customer. And also, we share common customers, that we have other 100 customers, which are both customers of us, right? So this, so when in the early days when Amplitude started, we were still startup back then. So there was a lot of thinking. So when we set up those developer accounts, we're just setting one, and there's also legal requirements where you can only have one account per entity kind of thing, right? But later on, when the system expands and we're building more and more integrations, the problem occurs where the same developer account was used for both purposes, both for the internal teams managing their own data and needs, and or for managing the OAuth stack, which is used for our common customers. And this become a burden. Sometimes it's a really heavy burden for us, because then any migration would come with a risk, and also the both teams are interfering, the internal teams and external facing teams are interfering with each other, where migration might provide risky, as it might break the data connections for hundreds of customers. So, and it's the burden that's happening, shown repeated pattern, and I wish I know that years ago, so we have all separation of responsibilities for those internal external apps, and yes, this actually came with some of the cost. That's kind of the lesson I have. So advice for you: try to separate your internal external system as much as you can.
And the cold shower.
And a cold shower. So Eldad, we can play a bit of bad cop, good cop. So you asked about kind of a failure. I'll do the kind of opposite things. So 2022 is coming to an end, right? Like, tell us about something you're super proud of, kind of that your team accomplished this year, that really was huge and that you thought before was, I don't know, impossible.
Interesting. So two things in mind. First, we launched we call it a developer portal in the early of the year. So basically, it's an effort to scale the number of connections we support by supporting third-party developers to build integrations towards us. Because whenever a large client comes to us, they're like, hey, can you have this 20 integrations? And there's only so much we can do. It just never scale, right? So we have to rely on our partners to build that bridge, and then we provide this generic framework to allow them to submit integrations just in a configuration-based manner, right? So we kind of we have a system that parses those configurations and basically set it up. So it's been provide quite successful this time. We probably have almost 50 partners submitting their integrations this year. So I think that's a huge success for us, right? That's one thing. The other for streaming, I mentioned the streaming is actually a new product we launched in Q3, right? So it's basically came to, that real-time data propagation is increasing demand. Because at the beginning we think about that we're analytical tools. We want to get data in, but we don't want to get data out. But that's apparently not true, especially for the real-time cases. It's basically the path through. They're using our governance features exactly back to that, the earlier point, right? So, but it's again a different system with it comes with its own challenges, with the reliability, the latency cost, and the kind of broadcast overall. So I think this is a huge shout out for all the engineers, if you're listening on this, right? So thank you for this great achievement. Whoa. Yeah.
Awesome. So
first example, by the way, was amazing. I mean, and as a startup, we meet a lot of partners and platforms, and we divide them into two: those that have built connectivity so third party can build their own stuff into the system, and those that are not, they're black box, and a long tail of startups cannot connect to those platforms. So it's really important, and you never know how and when someone is using your system, and you learn a lot by just opening it up. So congrats on that, especially to your engineers. It's an amazing effort.
Thank you. So absolutely. So as Amplitude, one of the benefits as a public company, because it actually earns the trust for lots of the partners out there, so they're willing to build with us. But of course, there are times those bigger players which never think about building to us, so we have to still in doing our job. But it definitely still make our life much easier. Yeah.
Right. I mean, kind of for us as a database vendor, right? Like this is kind of in terms of the dialect and kind of wanting to be compliant with Postgres, kind of to make it easy for the ecosystem to kind of adopt. So I actually it's interesting that you guys face similar challenges or similar problems in that regard. Cool. In terms of the second thing, so I mean, you guys provide these like very specific data experiences, right? Kind of to analyze certain user interactions and those types of things. How does this work actually in terms of like schema management? Like, do you guys basically say, okay, data has to come to our connectors in a certain schema, and then we can give these use cases or like these types of analytics products? Or do you actually kind of manage the schema in your connectors and kind of in your system and can accept like data in whatever form or shape?
So, if you see the pattern for all my answers, like it really depends. And we try because as Amplitude evolves, as we get more and more customers from different spectrum, where the really mature customers where they have their own stuff, or low maturity customers we don't have anything, which is actually easier, or somewhere in the middle where they have something but not. So we try to be flexible, right? So if they want to use our governance feature, they can, and if we can block all the events. Again, we think things are the events, right? If the event doesn't fall into the tracking plan, we just block them. That's either way, and we can do dedupe transformations, filters. Certain data only goes to certain destinations, and all with different identity resolutions, all of that. But we try to accommodate as much as we can. So that's why it actually involved a lot over time with all different use cases coming in. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah,
it's all about surface area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Awesome.
I think we've nailed it.
Definitely.
All right. Yeah.
All right, Weichen. So thank you so much for your time. We super appreciate it. This was super interesting, learning more about what you and your team are doing at Amplitude. So
and we're going to check out hopefully next year the connector framework.
Definitely.
All right.
It's homework for us.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Awesome. Take care and have a great day.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.